In this video, we're going to look at how Weezer's Say It Ain't So uses instrumentation to both reflect the emotion in the lyrics and create variation between repeated sections. Let's begin by looking at how the lyrics and themes of the song are reflected in what the music is doing. The technical term for this is word painting. A basic example of word painting would be to combine dark, sad lyrics with a minor key, which is what Amy Winehouse does in Back to Black. We only said goodbye with words. I died 100 times, and you go back to her and I go back to black. But Say It Ain't So uses different types of word painting. Now, before we get into what these are, we first need to take a look at the lyrics so we understand what the song is about. First, a few clarifications. A Heine is an abbreviation of Heineken, a kind of beer, and a cold one is a commonly used term for any kind of beer. Two other words that can sometimes cause confusion in casual listeners are the names Jimmy and Stephen. Jimmy is the brother of Weezer's frontman, Rivers Cuomo, while Stephen is his stepfather. So the song is about a moment in Rivers' teenage years when he opened the refrigerator at his house and noticed a bottle of beer sitting inside, which caused him to make the connection to his biological father's alcohol consumption and the breakdown of his parents' relationship, which ultimately led to their divorce. So here he is, years later, his mother has remarried, and he's looking into the fridge at this bottle of beer, terrified that the pattern of drinking leading to divorce is going to repeat itself with his stepfather, Stephen. So now we know what the lyrics are about, let's look at how the music reflects these lyrics and really takes the song to another level emotionally. Now in the verse sections, our protagonist acknowledges the problem. There's a beer in the fridge that might be an omen of bad things to come. But he's trying to keep his emotions in check. He's doing his best to go about his business as usual and pretend everything is fine. This is reflected in the music with the relaxed drum beat, chill, reggae-like offbeat chords played by guitar 2, and the cool bass line. However, the three chromatically ascending notes in the bass line can be seen as a musical depiction of the protagonist's emotions bubbling to the surface. This bubbling is mentioned at the end of verse section 1, where he acknowledges that something is bubbling and the bottle is ready to blow. A nice beer metaphor for his emotional state. This image of building pressure before an explosion is also reflected musically by the sudden crescendo of electric guitar feedback, which leads us into the chorus. The chorus marks the point where all his suppressed emotions surface in an explosion of how he really feels. This is expressed musically in the guitars, which shift from the clean guitar sound used in the verses to a heavier, distorted sound. The distorted guitars also continue throughout the bridge and the guitar solo sections, where he dives deeper into the details of his estranged father, whose departure is at the center of all these raw emotions. Dear Daddy, I write you in spite of years of silence. This loud, soft dynamic, primarily driven by the contrast between the clean and distorted guitars, is a key feature found in the music of the Pixies and Nirvana, two early influences on Weezer's sound and style. And in this particular song, the loud, soft contrast really does fit the lyrics perfectly. We can think of the clean guitar in the verse sections as representing the calm surface veneer that any onlooker would see if they saw this teenager going about his business, while the distorted guitars in the chorus reflect the hidden emotional anguish that lies beneath his outward appearance and actions. Another fantastic example of word painting that most people might miss appears in the guitar solo. This section actually uses 2 additional guitars on top of the 2 rhythm guitars playing the chords. Now in the solo, notice how the guitar repeats its lines. Here's the first repetition. Then we have the 2 guitars playing the same line in opposite sides of the headphones, one after another, like an echo. After this call and response, the 2 guitars come together, playing the final line of the solo in unison. Given this song is about a fear of history repeating itself, I see this repetition in the solo as a reflection of that key lyrical theme. You could even see the 3rd repetition of B as the son potentially falling into the same pattern of alcohol abuse. Then the 2 guitars playing together is his fear that the fate of his stepfather's relationship will follow that of his father's. Now, whether this musical metaphor or word painting was intended by Weezer, or whether it was just a happy accident, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It exists either way. Whether the artist was conscious of it or not is irrelevant. Although, it would be interesting to know if Rivers did this on purpose or not. If anyone has a direct line to Rivers, ask him and let us know in the comments. A quick side note, I really love the rhythm of the guitar chords. Rest, rest. And there are actually a number of hit songs that use this guitar rhythm for their chorus. I love rock and roll, put another dime in the jukebox, baby. I'm just a teenage dirtbag, baby. And Heart-Shaped Box kind of does it too. Hey, wait, I got a new complaint. In fact, Heart-Shaped Box even has the same lead note bends in between the chords. This makes me wonder if Weezer might have been influenced by this Nirvana song, considering it would have been omnipresent in popular culture around about the time that Weezer was recording Say It Ain't So. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Now let's look at the second way this song masterfully uses instrumentation. So with every song, there is a balancing act between the need for repetition and variation. Repetition is a key part of all musical styles. We need repetition so that there is something familiar for the listener to grab onto. However, if the same thing is repeated too much, it gets boring and the listener is likely to tune out. So we need variation. The common technique for achieving these 2 goals simultaneously is to repeat structural sections but alter the instrumentation each time around. So the second time we hear something, it's familiar, but there's also something new about it for our ears to latch onto. It gives repeated sections a sense of growth and forward momentum. So let's look at how each repeated section in Say It Ain't So varies its instrumentation. First, we have the pre-verse instrumental section. The drums, bass, and guitar too remain the same in all 3 of these sections. However, the vocals and guitar 1 are slightly different each time. Let's begin with the vocals. The first time through, the vocals sing "Oh Yeah" at the beginning of bar 1 and "All Right" at the beginning of bar 3. Oh yeah. All right. But the second time through, the vocal activity doubles, so there is singing at the beginning of every bar. Oh yeah, alright, feels good inside. Then the third time through, the vocals are completely absent. As for guitar 1, the first time through, it is identical to the intro guitar part. Oh yeah. But the second and third time it occurs, it branches off from the main riff in bars 3 and 4 with a brief solo. And these solos are different each time.
Oh yeah.
These variations in the vocal and guitar 1 parts keep the repeated sections fresh. They are subtle enough that casual listeners may not even notice them when combined with the bass, drums, and guitar 2, but subconsciously they work to hold the listener's attention. Now the verses are interesting because verse 1 and verse 2 are actually very similar. The bass, drums, and both guitars are the same in each verse. But where we get variation in the verses is in the vocal melody. These blue areas are identical, or very close to identical in each verse, while these red areas are the variations. Let's start by comparing the first 2 verses. In the second bar of the first verse, the melody drops down to an E flat and G.
Is crowding my icebox.
But in the second verse, it goes to the same notes, but up an octave.
Wrestle with Jimmy.
It's a nice little variation because it keeps the listener on their toes. They're not expecting it. Reaching up to those higher notes also raises the tension slightly. Next, in verse 1, we have Somebody's Cold One.
Somebody's cold one.
But in verse 2, we get this playful stretching of the final syllable of the word bubbling, alternating between a G and B flat, which has an onomatopoeic effect. In other words, it is sung in a way that kind of sounds like bubbling.
Something is bubbling.
This is a very creative variation on the melody from verse 1, and is another example of the word painting I mentioned earlier. At the end of verse 1, the melody simply rests on E flat.
My eyes.
But in the second verse, it reaches up to those higher notes before stepping back down to the E flat. Once again, the higher notes push up the tension and reflect the lyrics, "The bottle is ready to blow."
Ready to blow.
As a side note, I quickly want to point out how the backing vocals in the first 2 verses double the main vocal, but up an octave. I think it adds a really nice texture to the vocals.
Somebody's hiding. It's crowded my icebox. Somebody's cold one is giving me chills. Guess I'll just close my eyes.
Now let's compare the melody of the first and third verses. The first 4 bars are pretty much identical to verse 1. However, in bar 5, the third verse radically departs from verse 1. This is not just another variation, it actually branches off into new material, and its length is extended by 2 bars. Notice how the melody in the second half of verse 3 sits considerably higher than anything that has come before it. And it also has all these continuous 16th notes. This really amps up the tension and reflects the singer's emotions rising to the surface as we near the chorus.
Guess I'll just close my eyes. This way as the water slide away from me that takes us further every day. So be cool.
Now, in addition to the melodic variation, the other things that differentiate verse 3 from the previous 2 verses are the absence of the high-pitched backing vocals and the absence of guitar 1. Admittedly, the guitar 1 part in verse 1 and verse 2 was pretty subtle, so you barely notice its absence in verse 3.
Old one is giving me chills. Guess I can't confront you. I never could do.
But you do notice guitar 1's reappearance in the second half of verse 3, where it plays an aggressive power chord at the onset of each new chord. This coincides with the higher pitched emotional vocal part and really helps boost the tension leading into the chorus.
This way is a water slide away from me that takes us further every day. So be cool.
Now let's look at the choruses. On the surface, these three sections look identical, but there are three things that separate them. So here's the guitar rhythm in the first chorus and the guitar rhythm in the second and third choruses. The first difference we can see is that while the first chorus has rests between the guitar chords, the second and third choruses fill this space between chords with note bends.
Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so.
The second difference is the rhythm at the end of the chorus. Also note the shift in drums from eighth notes on the open hi-hats to eighth notes on the crash cymbal in choruses 2 and 3. So here's chorus 1.
My love is a life taker.
And chorus 2.
My love is a life taker.
Now the final thing that differentiates the three choruses is the vocal harmonies. The main vocal is doubled in the choruses, which is pretty standard practice. So the backing vocals sing the exact same notes and lyrics as the main vocal. You'll also notice this doubling of the main vocal in the latter part of the bridge as well. Now in chorus 1, the backing vocal mirrors the notes of the main vocal exactly. They both sing in unison the whole way through.
Say it ain't so. Your drug is a heartbreaker.
However, at the end of verse 2, the backing vocal breaks away from the main vocal, singing a third and sixth below it.
A life taker.
This new pattern is then repeated in the third chorus. But the third chorus also adds additional harmonies, thirds to be precise, in the first half of the chorus.
Your drug is a heartbreaker.
These additions to each successive chorus result in an organic feeling, like the chorus is growing in texture and complexity as the song progresses. If you enjoyed this look at the instrumentation of Say It Ain't So, check out my other Say It Ain't So videos, where I break down the structure, chords, and how I made my own version of this song in Logic Pro. And like and subscribe if you got something out of this video.